It started with thunder, low and crawling, like something clearing its throat in the distance. By the time the storm reached the Killough property, the air had turned metallic, and the trees bent as if listening. That was June 3rd, 1993. The last day anyone saw Carol Killough or her two sons. A neighbor, driving along County Road 11 before the rain broke, spotted them standing motionless in the field behind their house. Carol in her long denim skirt, Benjamin and Thomas in matching shirts, one of them holding something to his chest. They were facing east, not moving, not waving. The neighbor didn't stop. The next morning, the sheriff's office got a call from a postal worker. The box out front was overflowing. Packages stacked by the door were soaked through. Deputies arrived around 9:40 a.m., found the front door unlatched. The power was out, and the kitchen clock had frozen at 1:17 a.m. No sign of struggle. No sign of life. Beds made. Dishes washed. The stove still warm. But in the cellar, behind a crumbling cinder-block wall, beneath a mound of loose, damp clay, they found the first tape. No label, no date, just a woman's voice, calm and slow, saying, "We'll begin with obedience." The case would consume the town for months, then the state, then the country, and still, 30 years later, no trace of Carol, Benjamin, or Thomas Killough has ever been found. Just 11 tapes, and a house that still smells of rain and something deeper beneath. Carol Killough came back to LaFleur County in the fall of 1991, arriving in an aging Dodge Caravan with 2 boys and a silence that didn't lift. She had left Mississippi a decade earlier, married a man in Memphis, had her children, lived in a small apartment above a dry cleaner. But her husband, Alan, died suddenly. A scaffolding collapse. The kind of accident that leaves no one to blame, but everyone a little shaken. She didn't attend the funeral. Instead, she packed everything into the van and drove south, arriving unannounced at her family's old farmhouse. The place had stood vacant for years, weather-worn, sunk in the shoulder of the earth like something too tired to fight gravity. The land around it had once been used for cotton, then soybeans, then nothing. She moved in without asking. There were no utility hookups, no phone, no mail for months. When the county clerk finally got hold of her, Carol filed homeschooling paperwork for both sons, citing emotional unsuitability for structured academic environments. Benjamin was 14, polite but guarded. Thomas was 10, and often barefoot, described by a local grocer as a shadow in a boy's body. Neighbors, what few there were, noted strange routines. Carol pacing the property at dusk, her arms stiff at her sides. The boys seen digging near the tree line, filling wheelbarrows with soil and wheeling them to the back of the house. One man, passing by in February of '92, said he heard chanting. When asked to describe it, he said, it wasn't English, and it didn't sound like a prayer. Carol didn't attend church, not anymore. But she visited the chapel twice that spring to leave envelopes, empty, save for pages of handwritten notes in pencil. Sermons, it seemed, written by her, but not for preaching. The sheriff's office had no reason to intervene. There were no calls, no complaints, no school absences to track. Just a woman, grieving, a mother, teaching, a family rebuilding on family land. And for a time, it seemed like that might be all there was to it. But in retrospect, the signs were clear. The boys stopped being seen altogether in the summer of '92. One neighbor reported hearing Thomas cry for nearly an hour one afternoon, the sound cut off like a radio dial turning down. Carol began walking into town less and less, and when she did, she kept her head low, muttering to herself, her hands always dirty, palms stained red with clay. The town told itself what it needed to, that she was odd, but harmless. That the house had always had a strange feeling, that some people just need to be left alone. No one asked what she was building in the cellar, or what was being buried beneath it. The cellar wasn't listed on the original blueprints. In fact, for decades, locals believed the Killough house didn't have one. The foundation sat low, and the surrounding land was dense with root and rock. But when deputies pushed through the door at the bottom of the kitchen stairs on June 4th, 1993, they found more than just a storage space. They found something hand-dug. The air was different down there, thicker, like something breathing just out of reach. A narrow corridor had been carved out beneath the main floor, its walls lined with mismatched paneling and slabs of concrete. At the far end stood a false wall, brittle and bowed, flaking paint the color of rusted tin. Behind that wall was a mound of clay, fresh, loose, red. The first mason jar emerged with a shovel's scrape, sealed tightly, wrapped in burlap. Inside, a VHS tape, dry despite the wetness around it. Then another, and another. The soil yielded them like offerings, 9 in total, each individually sealed, each buried at varying depths as if by ritual. The jars themselves bore no fingerprints, no smudges. Forensics later confirmed they were all wiped clean or handled only with gloves. The tape labels, those that had them, were handwritten in thin, uneven strokes. Lesson 1, Night 1, Noise. Some were dated, others not. All had the same thing on the spines, a single black X. Deputies brought the tapes to the sheriff's office. The room where they were first played was locked. Only 3 people watched: Sheriff Elmore, Deputy Lydia King, and a young analyst from Jackson named Doyle. The first image was static, then a flicker. Then Carol Killough, sitting cross-legged on a concrete floor, hands resting in her lap. She faced the camera directly, eyes glassy but focused. Behind her, the wall was marked with circles and chalk. The boys sat to her left, silent, cross-legged, mirroring her posture. She spoke gently, slowly. "We'll begin with obedience," she said. "The soil listens, but it does not speak, until we are worthy." From the beginning, it was clear. This wasn't a home video. It was a record, a set of instructions, a catalog of rituals, behaviors, moments. The kind of thing investigators rarely see outside the context of cult activity or psychotic breaks. But there was no mention of gods, no clear doctrine, just her voice. Soft, insistent, methodical. And beneath it, a faint noise, present on every tape. A low, granular hum, like someone dragging a hand through dry earth. The cellar was sealed off that night. The rest of the tapes were exhumed carefully, bagged, logged. But no one had a name for what they were looking at. Therapy session? Manifesto? Dissent? The sheriff ordered a full excavation of the space. No bodies were found, no blood, no personal items. Just more clay, packed deep, unnaturally smooth, as if placed by hand. Something had been down there, but whatever it wasn't trying to hide. It was waiting. The first tape ran for 42 minutes. It was dated April 19th, 1993, 6 weeks before the Killoughs disappeared. The camera is static, fixed on a tripod or mounted on the wall. The room is dimly lit by a single bulb hanging low from a frayed cord. There are no windows. The walls are bare concrete, except for 3 chalk circles behind Carol. Each one is different. One spiral, one jagged like a sunburst, one just a solid, dark smear. Carol Killough sits in the center of the frame, barefoot, her hands folded in her lap. Her hair is wet, or appears to be. Her expression is calm, but there's a tension in her jaw, like she's bracing for something. "We'll begin with obedience," she says. without looking at the camera. To her left, Benjamin sits cross-legged, 14 years old, motionless, staring at his mother with a blank, unreadable face. Thomas, 10, sits closer to the edge of the frame. He picks at his fingers, looking toward the floor. "The soil listens," Carol says, "but it only answers when we're clean, and obedience is the first cleansing." She instructs the boys to repeat after her. The words are not unfamiliar, simple, almost biblical in cadence. "I obey the silence. I obey the root. I obey the mouth." Benjamin repeats each phrase without hesitation. Thomas stumbles on the last one, whispering it too quietly to be heard. Carol doesn't react. She closes her eyes. A long pause. The tape crackles. The low hum grows louder, still indistinct, but clearly present beneath the dialogue. Audio experts later described it as a frequency just outside speech range. Not natural, but not digitally added either. At the 28-minute mark, Carol opens a book. The contents are illegible, but she reads aloud. The language is unclear, possibly nonsense, possibly a private code. Her voice shifts, slower, heavier, each word separated by a deliberate pause. Thomas begins to cry, softly. Benjamin glances at him but doesn't move. Carol stops reading. "We do not cry when the mouth is listening," she says. Her voice is firm, but not angry. She touches Thomas's face gently, brushing the hair back from his forehead. Then she turns to the camera and speaks directly. "When the flesh obeys, the clay will open. Until then, we practice." The last few minutes of the tape are silent. The three of them sit there, breathing, not moving. The camera stays on long after Carol leaves the frame. Thomas remains seated, shoulders shaking slightly. Benjamin doesn't move. Then, just before the tape cuts out, he looks into the lens. Directly. Eyes wide. He mouths something. No audio. No context. But analysts believe the words were, "Don't dig." The tape ends in static. No timestamp. No signature. Just that hum. Rising. Then gone. By the end of that week, word of the tapes had spread far beyond LaFleur County. It started with a leak. A sheriff's deputy, never officially named, reportedly shared a dubbed copy of the first tape with a cousin in Greenwood. Within 3 days, it was circulating among local church groups. Within 2 weeks, a copy surfaced on a late-night radio show out of Baton Rouge. From there, it exploded. The footage was grainy. The audio imperfect. But none of that mattered. The content spoke for itself. A woman in a cellar, calmly teaching her children to obey the earth beneath them, to kneel, to offer, to listen. It hit a nerve. In 1993, the memory of Jonestown was still raw. The satanic panic had left a scorched mark on every small town in the South. To many viewers, this wasn't just a missing persons case. It was proof of something deeper. A cult? A ritual? A failure of faith? Reporters arrived by the van load. The Killough property was swarmed, then cordoned off. Local police pushed back, but the perimeter was thin. Photos of the house, its chipped siding, the broken front steps, the red soil around the cellar door, were plastered across tabloid covers and true crime segments. Sheriff Elmore, usually a steady hand, began to look worn. At one press conference, he said plainly, "We don't know what this is. We're not calling it criminal yet, but it's not nothing." The tapes, 11 in total, were copied, dissected, uploaded, and discussed by people who had never set foot in Mississippi. Armchair experts labeled Carol a doomsday prepper, a cult leader, a schizophrenic, a mystic. Everyone had a theory. No one had an answer. Local opinion fractured. Half the town called for prayer vigils and moral renewal. The other half wanted everyone to shut up and let law enforcement do its job. Tension rose. A small group of teenagers were caught trying to sneak into the Killough basement at night. They claimed they just wanted to see where the whispering started. Carol's sister, Meredith Grant, held a press conference from her home in Memphis. Eyes red-rimmed, voice shaking, she pleaded for dignity. Carol was not a monster. She was broken after Alan died. She wasn't herself, but she loved those boys. Please, please stop watching those tapes like they're entertainment. They're a tragedy, not a story. But the story wouldn't stop. A copy of Tape 4 appeared on a national talk show. Audio was played on drive-time radio. Online forums began cataloging the symbols drawn in chalk behind Carol's head. Some thought they were astrological. Others, Masonic. One fringe site claimed they matched patterns found in prehistoric burial caves in Eastern Europe. The house was now a landmark. The family, a spectacle. And the boys, 2 children who'd once dug in the dirt behind their home, were no longer missing persons. They were mythology. Tape 3 was recovered from deeper in the cellar under a slab of flattened concrete. It was wrapped in black cloth and sealed with a tight coil of twine. When investigators finally played it, what they found was quieter, slower, and harder to watch. The tape begins with static and a low whirring, like the camera's internal mechanisms are straining. It clears to reveal Carol seated with her back to the wall, facing her sons. No chalk symbols this time. The walls are bare, the air visibly damp. Condensation drips down from the low ceiling. Something about the space looks narrower, like they've moved deeper underground. Carol speaks in a near whisper. "There's a mouth under the house," she says. "Not a real one, not teeth and tongue. It doesn't bite. It waits." She instructs Benjamin and Thomas to lie down on their backs. They obey. She walks between them, barefoot, muttering. Her movements are fluid, almost hypnotic. She carries a shallow bowl filled with red clay and water. She begins to paint their foreheads in silence. "When I was a girl," she says, "I heard it call. In the walls, in the trees. I thought it was grief, or God. But it was always the mouth. And now, you must speak to it too." Thomas begins to tremble. His chest rises quickly. He's crying, though no sound comes out. Carol leans down beside him and murmurs something inaudible. Then she turns to Benjamin. "Do you understand?" Benjamin nods but doesn't look at her. His gaze is fixed on the ceiling, wide-eyed, unblinking. Midway through the tape, there's a flicker, a cut. Forensic analysts would later determine that 2 full minutes had been removed, either taped over or intentionally erased. The transition is abrupt. Carol's posture changes. She's kneeling now, facing the wall, whispering rapidly. The boys are no longer on camera. Then a new sound begins. It's low, rhythmic, not mechanical, but not quite natural either, like soil being sifted in steady pulses. It rises from the background until it overtakes Carol's voice entirely. She does not seem to notice. The camera shakes, just slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough that viewers online later speculated something had moved behind it. A shadow? A person? No definitive image appears, only motion. Carol speaks again, more clearly now. "When the mouth opens," she says, "you will know it by the wind. It won't come from above. It comes through the bones." The tape ends with all 3 seated again. No one speaks. Thomas rocks slightly. Benjamin watches the lens with eerie stillness. Then, just as the screen begins to flicker, a voice, not Carol's, says one word: "Listen." Investigators reviewed the audio dozens of times. No one could determine its origin. No one else was supposed to be in the house, and neither of the boys appeared to speak. Still, the voice was clear. Male. Calm. Close. and it said only that one word. Leflore County kept poor records before 1950. Land deeds were handwritten. Burials were marked with wood stakes, or not at all. But when archivists and amateur researchers began tracing the Killough property after the tapes surfaced, what they uncovered added a new layer to the already chilling case. The land had been in the Killough family since 1919. Carol's great-grandfather, Elijah Killough, purchased the plot for $600 after returning from the Great War. He was described in one article as quiet, proud, and hard-headed, a Methodist by birth, but known to host private prayer circles in the woods behind his home. When interviewed in 1940, he told a WPA field worker that he believed the land was thick with memory. In 1941, Elijah began writing letters to a distant cousin in Jackson about dreams. He described waking in the night to the sound of clay moaning, wrote about digging for silence and things without names. He claimed to have found bone beneath the orchard, not animal bone. The letters are erratic, increasingly fragmented, and end abruptly in 1943. That same year, he died from what the coroner listed as accidental ingestion of lye. No further investigation was conducted. Decades later, in Carol's own journal, found in a sealed drawer upstairs, she referenced those same dreams. I was 5 the first time I heard it under the floor. Daddy said it was pipes. Mama said it was nothing. But it moved. Carol's father, Jonas Killough, died in 1972 in a house fire. No foul play was suspected, though the official report noted he was found in the cellar, kneeling beside an empty tub, facing the corner. Carol never spoke publicly about her family history, but in one of the tapes, tape 5, she refers to the inheritance beneath. She tells her sons, "We come from listeners. We forget. We return." Soil tests conducted in 1993 after the cellar was excavated revealed something else: unusually high concentrations of calcium phosphate and fragmented collagen. In lay terms, remnants consistent with historical bone breakdown, too degraded to test for species, too small to reconstruct. But there were hundreds of samples, buried deep, mixed with the red clay. No graves had ever been registered on the property, no indication of family plots, no tombstones, no funeral notices. Just the house, the field, the orchard long since overgrown, and the cellar, hand-dug across generations, deeper than it needed to be. A geologist brought in by the state noted something else. Beneath the house, the ground shifted differently, softer, more disturbed. Not natural subsidence, he said. This was made, over time, layer by layer. Someone was shaping the earth. But for what? That remains the question. Because the deeper they looked, the more it became clear. This wasn't just a case about one woman's collapse. It was about something older, something inherited, and maybe something buried for a reason. Tape 7 was the only one found outside the cellar. It was hidden in the attic, inside a rusted toolbox behind a wall of insulation. No jar, no label. Just a strip of masking tape across the cassette's edge with one word in faint pencil: offering. The recording quality was degraded. The image wavered. Colors faded into gray-blue. The microphone hissed constantly, masking low frequencies and making speech harder to isolate. Still, the scene was clear enough. Carol sat between her sons, cross-legged as always. This time, a shallow pit had been dug into the cellar floor, lined with black plastic, damp clay smeared around the edges. Beside the pit sat a wooden box, hand-carved, open at the top. The camera stayed fixed on this box for several minutes before Carol spoke. "Each of us places something we love," she said. "Something the mouth will recognize. Something true." Thomas went first. He stepped forward holding a faded photograph. The image is hard to make out, but appears to show a man in a baseball cap, presumably their father. Thomas crouched, placed the photo into the pit, and returned to sit beside his mother without speaking. Carol nodded, expression unreadable. Her attention turned to Benjamin. Benjamin stood. In his hands, a compass. Small, tarnished, the kind used for hiking. He stared at it for a moment too long. Then he knelt, lowering it into the pit, but not letting go. The video blurs here, either due to the tape's age or interference. Carol's voice becomes distorted. She leans in toward Benjamin, speaking rapidly. Only one phrase can be made out. Not for the mouth, for the movement. Benjamin still doesn't release the compass. Carol touches his wrist, and then he lets go. The next portion of the tape is nearly silent. The three of them sit around the open pit, eyes closed, breathing slowly in sync. The microphone begins picking up interference again, a sound similar to the earlier tapes, a kind of granular static. But this time, there's another texture underneath it, a wetness, like suction, like something shifting beneath packed dirt. At minute 29, the image distorts briefly, then refocuses. All three are lying flat now, side by side. The pit remains open, but something has changed. The items are gone. The compass, the photograph, the box, all of it, gone. No one had moved toward the pit. No cuts in the footage, no breaks. Carol speaks again. Her voice is almost inaudible. The first offering is accepted. The route begins to open. There's no reaction from the boys. The tape ends with the camera tilted slightly, as if nudged. For the final 90 seconds, it records the ceiling. Cracked plaster, one bare light bulb swinging slightly. Then it cuts to black. Not static, just black. By late July, the story had moved far beyond the confines of rural Mississippi. National media descended on LaFleur County like a second flood. Satellite trucks lined County Road 11. Reporters camped outside the sheriff's office. The Killough tapes, once classified evidence, had been digitized, duplicated, and dissected by amateur sleuths and conspiracy theorists alike. The most infamous moment came when Tape 7 aired in part on a nationally syndicated daytime show. The host, known more for celebrity interviews than true crime, introduced the footage with breathless commentary about ritual sacrifice and the darkness beneath the surface of America. What followed was a heavily edited sequence. Carol's quiet voice, Thomas placing the photo, Benjamin hesitating. It was enough. Within days, talk shows and tabloids branded the Killough case a modern cult mystery. Online forums erupted with speculation. Was the mouth literal or symbolic? Had Carol been mentally ill, or had she uncovered something ancient and terrifying? A small but vocal group insisted the family had uncovered an underground civilization. Others claimed demonic possession. A former FBI profiler appeared on primetime news and offered a colder take. "This is trauma made visible," he said. "A woman fractured by loss, enacting a symbolic system of control over her children. It's not a cult. It's not a demon. It's grief, recorded." But the public didn't want grief. They wanted horror. They wanted answers that would explain the unease they felt watching the tapes. Meredith Grant, Carol's only living sibling, tried to stem the tide. In a second press conference, she spoke with a lawyer at her side. She denounced the media, condemned the show that had aired the tape, pleaded for the footage to be taken down. "They were human beings," she said, voice cracking. "They weren't actors. They weren't monsters. They were in pain, and now you've turned them into entertainment." Her plea went ignored. The clips stayed online. Downloads skyrocketed. A subreddit dedicated to the tapes reached 40,000 members within a month. Theories became more elaborate. Some claimed there were hidden symbols in the background of every tape. Others insisted the audio distortion masked additional voices. The FBI became involved, briefly. But without bodies, without evidence of a federal crime, the case remained in local jurisdiction. For all the noise, nothing new had been discovered. The house itself, still boarded up, under county supervision, became a pilgrimage site for the curious and the disturbed. People left objects on the porch: candles, compass necklaces, children's drawings of mouths with no faces. The tapes were no longer just evidence. They had become scripture to some, spectacle to others. And through it all, no one knew the most important truth: where Carol, Benjamin, and Thomas had gone, or why nothing, no piece of clothing, no trace of blood, no sign of escape, had ever been found. The last tape bore no title, no markings. It was recovered late, missed during the initial sweep of the cellar, found lodged inside an old VCR in a side storage room, partially hidden behind a false panel. When investigators played it, they immediately noted the timestamp: June 2nd, 1993, 11:48 p.m., less than 2 hours before the power outage, less than 3 before the family was last seen. It begins in darkness. Then, a click. The bare bulb in the ceiling flickers on. The camera is slightly askew, off-center, tilted as if placed hastily. No one addresses the lens. Carol sits alone at first. Her hair is uncombed, her dress stained at the hem. She rocks gently, humming something low and wordless. The boys enter the frame from opposite sides, silently. They sit beside her without prompting. She speaks only once. "We're ready." Then she closes her eyes. The boys do the same. For several minutes, there is only breathing. No chanting. No movement. Just the faint, rhythmic sound of lungs filling and emptying in near-perfect unison. It continues long past the point of comfort. At one point, Thomas flinches, but Carol places a hand gently on his chest. He stills. Then something changes. The bulb begins to swing, slightly at first, then wider, casting rotating shadows across the wall. No one appears to touch it. The air seems to move, not fast, but steadily, like the beginning of wind. But there is no source. From the floor, beneath the pit now partially filled again, comes a new sound. Not the granular hum of the earlier tapes. This is deeper, a resonance, like a hollow drum struck far below. It repeats at irregular intervals. Carol opens her eyes. She doesn't look at the boys. She looks up. Then, in one sudden motion, she reaches out and takes their hands, one on each side. They rise together. The camera remains still. They walk out of frame, slowly, deliberately, toward the far side of the cellar, a section of the wall not previously shown in other recordings, a corner obscured by shadow, and, it now seems, something else. A narrow passage, dug by hand. The last clear image is their three backs receding into the dark. Then the light flares, too bright, and pops. The screen cuts to black. But the tape continues running for 47 minutes. Nothing is seen, nothing is said. Just the soft hiss of analog silence. No static, no wind. Just the quiet aftermath of something finished. At minute 46, a single sound breaks through. 3 soft knocks, from somewhere very near the microphone. Then nothing. The tape ends. No time code, no message. Just that one final recording. And a hole no one can explain. Once the final tape surfaced, the case took on a new, colder tone. No longer a question of when the Killoughs had vanished, but how, and into what. Theories had grown elaborate, but the investigation had nowhere left to go. The house was sealed, the cellar reinforced with temporary braces. For 3 weeks, forensic teams combed the site using ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, and fine-toothed excavation. They found no tunnels, no footprints, no alternate exits. The narrow passage seen in the final tape, it was there, but ended after 6 feet, sealed off by compacted earth and broken tile. No void beyond, no crawl space, just wall. Soil samples were taken in layers. Beneath the top strata, they found traces of burned organic material, ashes, possibly wood or paper, and beneath that, something else. Dozens of bone fragments, tiny, splintered beyond formal identification. Most were degraded, some reduced to dust. Forensic analysts couldn't confirm species, human or animal. What they did confirm was that the collagen levels in the clay were unnatural, higher than what's found even in known burial soils. And the spread of the material? Wide, deep, as if something had been fed into the earth. The official statement from the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation read, "Due to the compromised state of the site, we cannot confirm the presence of human remains. The Killough family is still listed as missing persons." There were no suspects, no charges. The case became less an investigation than a haunting. Carol's surviving sister, Meredith, sued to have the tapes removed from circulation. The case failed. The footage was deemed public domain once copies had proliferated. Online, the mystery only grew. Then came the reports, whispers at first. People who had visited the site began claiming headaches, nausea, nightmares. A documentarian from Texas suffered a seizure while recording audio in the cellar. A group of ghost hunters, unauthorized, trespassing, found their footage corrupted. One claimed he heard a breathing beneath the floor. None of it was confirmed, but all of it fed the legend. The county declared the property condemned. Eventually, a metal fence was erected, but it didn't stop the stories. Podcasts, Reddit deep dives, YouTube analyses, frame by frame. They still ask the same questions. Why did Carol do it? What was she hearing in the walls? What happened to the boys? And why, after all this time, has no one found so much as a shoe? It's been over 30 years. The Killough house stands empty, boarded windows, collapsing porch. But the cellar remains, still sealed, still full of that red, wet clay. And beneath it, maybe still listening, the earth waits. 3 decades later, the Killough case endures, not as a crime, not as an investigation, but as a presence, a story that refuses to conclude, a myth that feels too real to ignore. The tapes remain online, ripped, remixed, translated, analyzed. Dozens of podcasts have covered them. Hundreds of threads speculate on the true meaning of Carol's words, the rituals, the silence. Some call it the first analog creepypasta, an unintentional horror project born from delusion. Others believe it's proof of something we're not meant to understand. Digital archivists have cataloged the chalk symbols, cross-referencing them with everything from Sumerian glyphs to 19th century mourning sigils. No matches. Linguists have attempted to transcribe the phrases Carol spoke in tape 3, what she called mouth language. No consistent structure, no repetition. Still, people watch, and not just casually. The tapes inspire obsession. Some viewers claim recurring dreams. Others report strange coincidences, hearing breathing at night, finding clay under fingernails after watching. Most of it is theater, but some of it feels harder to dismiss. The house is still there, fenced, weather-worn, but intact. Locals say the air around it feels heavier, that birds won't nest nearby, that sometimes, especially in summer, the porch light flickers, despite no electrical connection for years. The county has refused demolition requests, claims the soil beneath it is historically sensitive. a quiet way of saying they don't want to dig. The Killough family is still officially listed in the National Missing Persons Database. No next of kin has claimed the property. No further evidence has surfaced. The cellar remains sealed. The pit untouched. Meredith Grant passed away in 2011. Her obituary made no mention of her sister or nephews. So that's what remains. A house, a handful of tapes, and a question with too many answers. Was it grief? Was it madness? Was it something older? Something unearthed and obeyed? No one knows. And maybe that's the point, because Carol said it best, just once, on tape 9. Eyes calm, voice low. Some truths don't rise, they wait. So now we wait too, for a body, a confession, a clue, a sound, or maybe, just maybe, for the mouth to open again.